when somebody goes ahead and makes Bitcoin legal tender or adopts it, which now we're seeing in many other countries. So we just saw Lugano, Switzerland, Malaysia today just described that they want to make Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies legal tender. There's numerous states in the United States that more marketing, but want to do it as well. Is it actually the technology itself and what economic impact it creates? Or is it more so become a flag in the ground? Hey, we want to be innovative. We want entrepreneurs. We want to be business friendly. We want to be at the forefront of this. And that leads to the positive impact of tourism, GDP growth, et cetera. Like, how do you think about that almost balance between the technology itself versus the impact?
Well, let me give you a scenario where Bitcoin or things like it might have a role in the future.
Okay.
The whole globalization thread that has driven everything since 1945. That's what's breaking down right now. And in my second book, Apps and Superpower, I think one of the things I said is it doesn't really matter where the break happens, it's going to cascade. So the Russia-Ukraine war was one of the specific examples I had. There was one in the Persian Gulf, there's one in East Asia. If you move away from the trade environment that we have, it's not that the dollar standard goes away. It probably becomes more important because the United States will be even more emotionally disconnected from other sections of the world and be more of an impartial arbiter, and the dollar will be more important and take more market share. But if you break down into a series of disconnected regional trading networks, not all of them have a country at its core that I would consider an economic power. So when you're looking at certain parts of the world that are going to lack access to and influence over any sort of Federal Reserve action, having another method of exchange that is not the physical US dollar has a role. You'll have to keep the electricity on. You'll have to keep the web working. And some of these places probably aren't going to be able to manage that. But there are other ways to establish a method of exchange in an environment where the US just doesn't care about half the planet.
So here's a theory that I have. I have increasing confidence that this is going to play out. But I actually think that the US dollar, let's use as an example, and Bitcoin will rise in strength together. And one way to view it is there's a stable coin that is pegged to the dollar. It's an algorithmic stable coin today that recently they made the decision, rather than try to use exotic financial mechanisms where people are arbitraging risk to keep it at $1, they simply are going to get rid of that system and move to a Bitcoin-backed stablecoin. So it's still a dollar-pegged asset that is tradable, and to your point, has stable value, so you remove the volatility concerns. But the value essentially replicates the gold standard, right? It's paper claims on the gold. Now you have a digital token valued at $1 that's pegged there, and it has some sort of underlying asset to it. I actually think that some of the weaker currencies, that is the path in which they essentially either adopt something to drive value to their weak currency, or they will fall at the feet of the dollar, right? There's consolidation around the dollar strength. And so we see these weak currencies fail in the face of that. And so one, I guess just like, what is your reaction to that? And two, have you seen anything that the weaker currencies are doing to try to basically survive in the face of a strengthening dollar and kind of this world order that seems to be shifting underneath it?
There were three strategies. One of the strategies used to be to find a regional pole like the euro or the yuan to work with. That has becoming less and less popular as people realize just how much the Chinese manipulate the currency, and especially in the aftermath of this round of sanctions against the Russians, even the euro is not seen as a good role for that. So we're left with two others. One is amalgamation, where you have a number of countries that pool their financial heft to make a regional currency, like the Caribbean dollar, or West Africa had the West African franc. I can't even honestly remember the status of that right now. It's changed so much in the last 2 years. Or option number three, you just peg it to the dollar, and that's not just Belize, that's de facto Hong Kong and Taiwan. You find ways to link yourselves into the bond market. So even if the currencies do swing, you have enough exposure so you get brought along for the swing. And that's more or less what the Australians and the Kiwis have been doing for decades. I see a lot more of that moving forward, because the parts of the world that the US is going to remain engaged in are the Western Hemisphere plus Southeast Asia and maybe Western Europe. But if you're talking about the Brits and the Japanese and the US and Canada, that's already 4 members of the G7. And if you include the rest of that kind of inner circle zone, you're still talking about 2 billion people. So either you can be associated with that, countries that have broadly positive demographic growth and consumption-led growth moving forward, or you can tie yourself onto something else where security is going to be a bigger concern for you than the finance. And when that is how people are thinking, that security is more important than finance, I really have a hard time seeing something like Bitcoin coming in out of the shadows.